Now friends, continuing to sit in meditation, let us listen to this affirmation and these few lines on the topic of service by Kriyananda ji. Service is ennobling. It is a way of offering our human littleness into the great reality that is God. Service should not be given with the thought that one is serving people merely. It should be given with an inward consciousness to the Lord, who resides in all creatures. When we serve others in this spirit, we find our own spirits becoming freed from egotism. Peace then fills us in the realization that there isn't anyone with whom we need compete. What joy to think that we belong to God. And now let's inwardly affirm this twice. I will serve God through others, and by my service to Him, release the hold the ego has on me. I am free in God I am free. I will serve God through others, and by my service to Him, release the hold the ego has on me. I am free in God I am free. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Please open your eyes. Welcome once again, friends. And as I mentioned, today's theme and topic is self-giving. And let me read this line from our book. November 2nd. Make everything you do an act of self-offering. Thus you will combat natural egoism and expand the boundaries of your reality to include the realities of others. Beautiful line, very brief reading for today. And he mentions two key words over there. In everything that we do, we make it an act of self-giving, self-offering in other words. And then he says it will help us release the grip of egoism or the grip of ego. We will be freed from egoism. And let me actually read the reading for tomorrow, which Kriyananda ji mentions the difference between egotism and egoism. A friend of mine once asked me the difference, and I replied almost without thinking. Egotism is pride, whereas egoism is excessive consciousness of oneself. I still consider that the best explanation of the difference. We need to overcome both qualities, but of the two, egoism is the subtler and the more insidious. The best way out of it is to give of oneself to others, to what one believes in, and to God. So there we are, a beautiful difference. And egoism isn't a word actually, people, or even in the media, it's a spiritual word actually, one may say. And most people, because they probably don't hear about it, it's not spoken about, it is not their concern. Actually, egotism, which is also Kriyananda ji saying a major challenge, that is considered to be of actually very high value in the world today. Kriyananda ji used to say that in many leadership books, authors would say at one point or another, you should slam the door or, keep the phone very loudly down and express your anger through some actions. Even if you're not feeling it, just to show people that you exist and who is in charge. I remember one time I was in residency training as a surgeon, and there was a major conference in Delhi. So all our teachers and doctors, my colleagues had gone there. I was just in first year, so I was not presenting anything or participating in anything major. And I just was roaming in the operation theatre that day to see what other departments and faculties are doing. And one anesthetist friend of mine, he said, "Hey, what are you doing here? All your friends are in the conference." I said, "Oh yeah, I'm just trying to learn something. I am not presenting anything." And he just shook his head like in such dismay. Sometimes as fathers would, you might say. He's like, No. This will not work, Aditya. How will you ever become successful as a doctor? You have to, stand on the rooftops and shout and let people know you exist through these conferences. And he said, otherwise it will not work, your career will never take off. And I thought there are tens of thousands of doctors in Delhi. And if everybody came down to that approach, that would be so competitive. And is it necessary? Is that the only way criteria to become successful? Certainly not. I'm sure many successful, actually truly successful people do not follow that approach. And that brings us to the point that on the spiritual path, you see in the caste system, friends, which many of us do not, appreciate today, rightly so because it has been misused in the last couple millennia. But Yogananda ji said when it was established, it was for a very high directional movement for, you might say, our personalities, our egos, but ultimately it taught how to transcend the ego, and I want to discuss that for a brief moment. So it begins with the category of Shudra, person or people with the consciousness which is very tamasic, which is very lazy, which does not move, which is inert, it's like a rock. They are happy where they are, need not change, there is no need to change. Even if you spend time moving them, after a while you see, they have gone back to their old habits and situations. And such people often are not very productive for themselves and others. And Master says, that is the lowest state of consciousness a human being can be in. And he says, when we move up to that, from there, we go into Vaishya consciousness. And in that consciousness, we are thinking, okay, I will do something, but I wonder what will I get? What's in it for me? And we want an exchange, often an equal, sometimes a disproportionate exchange. I'll do this much, but give me much more than that. There's a very huge expectation, but the person is at least moving, and there is an exchange between people and circumstances. And then we come to the third stage, the Kshatriya consciousness, which Paramahansa Yogananda ji said is a very noble consciousness. We were reading ennobling, service is ennobling. What is Kshatriya consciousness? Where our happiness depends on giving, on serving, on offering ourselves, our talents, our skills, and we say, whatever comes. So many times you must have seen, in your life, you say, whatever you feel like. I have been practicing as a doctor now for 8 years, and I had a rural practice. Many patients were genuinely very poor. And I would just tell them, even though my medicines were so affordable, I would say, whatever you can give. And even things like 20 rupees, 50 rupees, I would write down, and sometimes they would come after a few weeks and few months, or they would find me in the marketplace and give me that money. But my joy, I was still making money. Actually, I ran that business, you might say, or that clinic successfully for 5 years. But my happiness really was coming through making friendships, seeing them become healthy. I once saw a patient of mine who was paralyzed and bedridden for 6 years. Through Yogananda ji's energization exercises, start walking in 2 months. You can imagine, his bill was 255. I remember it because he did not pay it entirely. But my happiness did not come from those few rupees, as you can guess. It came from seeing him walk, and that's a Kshatriya consciousness. It thrives on giving. But then Yogananda ji said that there is another step we all need to understand and move towards. That is the Brahman consciousness, where one asks himself. You see, because we live in a world of duality, scriptures say. On a very simple level, we might say, today it's night time, winters are approaching, and after a few hours the day will come. We breathe in, we breathe out. We are born, everybody has to leave the body. So this is a world of duality, they say, equal and opposing forces. And a Kshatriya comes to understand that any difference that I make in this world of duality has brought me up, is refining my consciousness, but at a point is still an arrest in the upward movement of the soul's consciousness. And the natural question dawns, what is the upper step? Well, it is merging our consciousness, little ego, with the infinite consciousness. In Krishna, in the Bhagavad Gita says, you have two alternatives ultimately in life. Possessing things, people, circumstances. So many people want to possess time. As a doctor, again, I know people pay. Kriyananda ji wrote in one of his lectures, essays I should say, one of his essays, he writes that people are nowadays earning throughout their life, and they invest huge amounts of money, sometimes only to extend their life ultimately for a week or 2 weeks. in the end. That is where their money is utilized, to buy time, to possess time. But then Krishna says that is one option. And there's a limitation to possessing things. The other option, he says, is becoming. Becoming all the things, all the people, all their qualities, all the beauties, everything. He says, become that, because that is how God manifests creation. Today we know the universe is so big, there is no way it could have just fallen in place. Actually, scientists have found that even the slightest fraction of a difference in the way, you might say, the gravitational forces work would throw atoms and electrons and protons and consequently everything in creation totally out of place. So it is not by chance that all of this is moving. There is a divine intelligence, and when we start pondering, what can I do to become greater in my reality, we are moving into the Brahman consciousness. So I don't think, friends, egotism is so much of a problem with devotees. The real challenge, I should say, is egoism. And Kriyanandaji says that can be overcome by self-giving, self-offering. Offering of what? What is self-offering? On a simple plane, self-offering is giving something, you might say, to other people. Or if I have, let's say, a few chocolates in my pocket, I'll be more happy if I can give a few to other friends. 2000 years ago, Christ made a statement, which is the truth. He said, it is more blessed to give than to receive. Why more blessed? Kriyanandaji said, because it is more blissful. Again, the problem in today's world is everybody wants to take. Often I've seen many idealistic young people also say, oh yes, once somebody asked me, when I was running my rural clinic, I've heard you need donations for your clinic. As I was starting up, I said yes. I could buy a better toilet over there, and it was right in the fields, my clinic, and I had bought a shipping container. So I said, oh yes, I could buy some better facilities and a lab and such. So they said, okay, how much do you need? Will $30,000 be good for you? And it was on the phone, and I said, oh my goodness, absolutely, $30,000 is quite an amount. And I could even buy some land actually with that amount of money. And they said, I can give you that amount in 13 years. And I said, I thought 13 years? And they said, oh yeah, I've invested money in a scheme, and in 13 years, they just gave me the math of their scheme and told me that this percentage could come to me. Actually, it's been close to 8 years, so maybe I should wait for another 5 years and remind them that it's about time. But the point is that we often are so engrossed in some realities that of ourselves, that I need this, that ultimately Kriyanandaji says we lose a total sense of reality the way it is. We also lose, friends, a sense of reality of other people. Now, of all places, this can happen, for example, in a hospital. A doctor says, oh, I am going to just think of myself. Let's say, in an extreme case, he may say, I'm here, I have worked so hard just to make money. And soon you see that they are not able to relate to other person's complaints. Yes, they will still give the medicines, they are very sharp with diagnosis, but if it comes to their joy, if it comes to their energy, are they uncomplaining, in long circumstances, in let's say a long surgery or twist of events? Are they happy that they have led a life of self-surrender? Are they happy? Have they made friends with tens of thousands of people, which is a possibility when you are a wonderful physician? The answer is no. Do they feel alone sometimes? Yes. So it brings us to the point of realizing that we do not want to numb our heart, because you see, we have only two options. We can squeeze it, contract it, or we continue to expand it. When we expand, we feel our oneness with other things, and that's why again the caste system, to a person of lower consciousness, the whole concept of infinite consciousness is absurd and truly philosophical. They say that such a thing does not exist because it's not existing in their consciousness. Whereas to a saint, the other states do not exist because he is residing over there. So what is self-giving? It is something when we share of ourselves. And we have seen that yes, it can start. Actually, let me give you an example of this. It can start with the mundane, but it moves into the more, you might say, sublime acts of sharing. I'll give the example of Saint Francis of Assisi. I'm actually surprised how this simple example I have used in many different satsangs, because you can pick up this story from many different angles. As some of you may know, Saint Francis of Assisi, Italy, who lived about, I think, 800 years ago, 900 years ago, he was a great saint. And he was the son of a very wealthy businessman. And he would begin, his joy came by feeding other friends, throwing parties, and, making them feel joyful and entertained. And that did not make him so happy after a while, so he sought his adventures in war and, medals and such. And he was captured and actually put into prison by the enemies for a year, and he was not well. He started losing physical health. So it made him ask, where does joy really reside? And one day he discovered joy in giving money to a beggar, and he started doing more and more of that. But then he says, I need to go further. So he took a few friends, took lots of bales of fine clothing, and he went to a leper colony, and he bandaged their wounds, gave them food, gave them clothing and money, and was very happy. But few months later, he says, this is also not enough. They are also happy, they are contented in the body. And he started weeping. And so he went away from his friends and he said, what's happening to me? Am I going mad? Why am I not happy? Despite doing anything. And he was meditating in a cave and Christ spoke to him. And he says, Francis, you're not happy because you don't have me. And that is when he realized that all those things were wonderful, but now he needs to infuse them and infuse his service, his prayers, his acts with the joy of God. Kriyanandaji once said, if there is one thing you want to give to the world, he says, give joy. That is the highest gift. That joy is of the soul. When that joy is high, we naturally see it's the nature of joy to share and to give. And in giving, we actually we forget about ourselves. When we forget about ourselves, hunger does not matter. To again, mothers, if their child is ill, they could be serving. Sometimes mothers serve a sick child throughout their childhood, 20 years, 30 years. I've seen parents suffering, helping their children who are challenged in one way or another for decades. They become saints literally if you watch them over the decades. Why? Because they have given entirely the thought of themselves. And when there is no self, when there is no ego, Yoganandaji says there is God. You are relating to other people's reality. What are the different ways now in which we can give? Because that statement, simple statement of Swamiji says, in everything you do, aim for self-giving. Everything, is it possible? I think it is. Because it is an attitude above all. But let's see some practical ways in which we can release the grip that ego has on us. And this ego which today the world so much worships almost, you will see, friends, and you probably know, being on the path, it becomes a limitation. It actually keeps us away from greater realities and finer feelings. Kriyanandaji said, Master taught us that ego is situated in the medulla oblongata, at the back of the head in this small hollow. And that's why when we are egotistical, we move back from other people's realities and even tighten our heads at that point. And Kriyanandaji says, but one very simple way to bring this ego out of the way is to simply bow. And actually it was just yesterday I was driving this morning we were driving to a friend's place who had met with an accident. And I saw actually a politician bowing before the candlelight of Diwali in one of the big hoardings. And I said, that's very unusual. Often politicians, they're shown with these mobile phones and a big car or, looking up. But this person was gently bowing, and I said, for a change, that's a very good attitude. There was a lot of peace coming out from that hoarding, you might say. So, one very simple posture, which is again very universal, is to gently bow the head, and we bring our consciousness to this point. Also, the same, friends, can be done through meditation. When we meditate, we bring actually our energy up the spine, as we learn in yoga, and we offer it over there. Through chanting, like we were singing, Lord, I am thine, be thou mine. We are offering the heart's love at this point. And this can be done by first singing the words in the heart, you feel them. Then of course we are singing through the vocal cords. But we can ultimately bring those words, and There is something called silent chanting which you can do for a while, especially when you're by yourself, and you visualize yourself broadcasting those thoughts at this point. And Kriyanandaji says you will see your consciousness moving over there, and then we get experience of God in different forms like peace, inner light, calmness, joy, love. Why? How I should say? Because those realities are inside of us as the soul. When we get the ego out of the way, we experience them. Another very scientific way to overcome the egoism is to calm the breath. The breath is linked to the mind. It is also linked to ego identity. That's why if somebody challenges our ego, our breath becomes sharp, and we come back into that cycle. Whereas if we can learn to start living in moments of calm breath, and actually one state called Vishwas, without breath, it's a Hindi word, Vishwas. In that state, naturally we realize that I am He, that God is residing in me, there is, these qualities are inside of me, that is my higher reality, it becomes a part of our higher reality. So self-giving, friends, Patanjali said once, this is actually the lines of Yoganandaji, but Swami mentions it in the book Demystifying Patanjali, that by devotion and complete self-offering, we can attain that highest state of samadhi. And Swami says, even though Master taught Kriya Yoga, he expressed the supreme importance of this quality of self-giving, self-offering. Also, there are other ways of self-offering. Kriyanandaji says, for example, in today's world, we find ourselves being often involved in so many activities, and when we are energetic, which all yogis should be, they've crossed that stage of Kshatriya, what you see, and that is a state of extreme energy, controlled, focused energy. That energy expresses itself in the form of many talents. Kriyanandaji was the perfect example of this. He was a talented singer, composer, musician, writer, and such, speaker. But he says, one way to overcome egoism is to use your skills and offer your talents to God. He says, because ultimately everything comes from Him. He says, when you offer it to Him entirely and say, Lord, what is Thy will? He says, God will purify that desire, and He will return those gifts and use those talents of yours to do greater things in the world, to help other people. Isn't that beautiful? Cooking can be such a beautiful talent. So many, everything actually for that matter. Kriyananda used to say the colors we wear. I mean, you can just, it's literally everything as it says in the book. So let's meditate in this coming week on this verse of 2nd November, that in everything that we do, make self-giving your attitude, because it is the secret of joy, it is the essence of the spiritual path. It is actually another word of love and devotion. When we love somebody or something, don't we offer ourselves? We are willing to again and again do it, because again, love is nothing but, Master said, joy in movement. So in order to remain in joy, in order to remain perpetually in the state of love, let us practice self-offering. God bless you.